"Put the glass down, Mr. DeLuca. It's poisoned." The warning cut through the grand ballroom 3 seconds before Chicago's most feared mafia boss lifted the crystal tumbler to his lips. Every conversation stopped. 100 wealthy guests turned toward the woman standing beside the silver service cart, and then the room erupted in laughter. Her name was Grace Bennett, a 28-year-old maid with soft brown eyes, a full figure, and a black uniform stretched neatly over curves. The other staff members never let her forget. She had been working at the DeLuca estate for only 6 weeks, sending most of her paycheck to the nursing home caring for her mother, while sleeping in a tiny apartment above a laundromat on the south side. Grace was accustomed to whispers, cruel jokes, and people deciding she was clumsy before she touched anything. But tonight, beneath the chandeliers and cold white light, the humiliation felt sharper. Vanessa Cross, the elegant socialite seated beside the host, covered her smile with a jeweled hand. Did the new maid confuse poison with sugar? More laughter followed. Grace's cheeks burned, but she did not lower her eyes. Across the ballroom stood Roman DeLuca, the 36-year-old mafia boss whose name made judges nervous and rival families disappear from Chicago overnight. He wore a charcoal suit worth more than Grace earned in a year, his broad shoulders motionless, his expression carved from stone. Roman was wealthy, controlled, and dangerously powerful, but anger lived close beneath his silence. Since his younger brother had been betrayed and killed 2 years earlier, Roman trusted no one, touched no one, and rarely spoke unless someone was about to lose something valuable. Tonight, he was hosting a private charity auction while secretly negotiating a fragile peace with 3 criminal families. One insult, one mistake, or one sign of weakness could cost lives. His dark gaze settled on Grace. Most people trembled when Roman looked at them. Grace's hands shook, but she stepped between him and the drink anyway. "Move," Roman said quietly. The single word emptied the laughter from the room. Grace swallowed. She noticed his security chief, Marco Bell, watching her from beside the marble fireplace, one hand hidden inside his jacket. She also noticed Vanessa's smile fading. "I can't do that, sir." Gasps moved across the ballroom. No employee refused Roman DeLuca. Not twice. Roman took one slow step toward her, leaving only a few feet between them. "Do you understand who you're speaking to?" "Yes," Grace answered. "A man who'll be dead before dessert if he drinks that." Someone near the auction table snorted. Vanessa rose, her silver gown catching the light. "Roman, this is embarrassing. Have her removed." 2 guards approached Grace, but she grabbed the tumbler first. Roman's jaw tightened. "Do not touch my glass." "Then watch." Before anyone could stop her, Grace lifted the drink and poured it into the vase of white roses beside him. For one long second, nothing happened. Then the flowers began to curl. Their white petals darkened at the edges, collapsing as if burned by invisible fire. The ballroom fell silent enough for Grace to hear the ice cracking inside the empty glass. Roman looked at the dying roses, then at the woman everyone had mocked. His anger did not vanish. It changed direction. "Lock the doors," he ordered. Heavy bolts slammed into place. Guests screamed as guards moved through the room. Grace placed the tumbler on the table, but Roman caught her wrist before she could step away. His grip was firm, not cruel, and his voice dropped low enough that only she could hear him. "How did you know?" Grace glanced toward the service corridor. "The bottle was sealed when I brought it upstairs. 10 minutes later, the seal had been replaced, and the man who touched it wore the same black gloves as your security team." Roman's eyes sharpened. "Which man?" Grace hesitated. Fear finally crossed her face, not for herself, but for what her answer might ignite. Marco Bell moved closer to the fireplace, his hidden hand shifting beneath his jacket. Roman noticed. So did Grace. Without warning, she did the unthinkable. She shoved the most dangerous man in Chicago to the floor, just as a gunshot shattered the chandelier above them. Glass rained across the marble. Roman rolled over Grace, covering her body with his own as his guards drew their weapons. When the echoes faded, he looked down and saw blood spreading across the shoulder of the trembling maid, who had just saved his life twice in less than a minute. Then Grace whispered the name of the traitor, and Roman's face went colder than death. "Marco Bell," Grace whispered, and Roman DeLuca's expression became terrifyingly calm. The traitorous security chief fired again from beside the marble fireplace, but Roman dragged Grace behind an overturned banquet table as his guards returned fire. Guests screamed and crawled beneath tables while shattered crystal glittered across the ballroom floor. Marco disappeared through the service corridor before Roman's men could reach him, leaving one wounded guard and a trail of blood near the kitchen door. Roman barely looked after him. His attention remained fixed on Grace. Blood soaked the shoulder of her black uniform, and her face had gone pale, yet she was still trying to push herself upright. "Stay down," he ordered. "The shooter escaped," she said through clenched teeth. "Your people need to check the east stairwell." Roman stared at her. Even injured, she was thinking about everyone except herself. He removed his suit jacket and pressed it gently against her wound. The gesture silenced the guards gathering around them. They had seen Roman break alliances with a sentence and ruin men with a glance, but none had ever seen him kneel on a ballroom floor to protect a maid. "Call Dr. Hayes," Roman said. "Now." One guard reached for Grace, but Roman's voice turned sharp. "No one touches her." Then he lifted her into his arms himself. Grace tensed, embarrassed by the ease with which he carried her and by the eyes following them across the room. She had spent years making herself smaller in crowded spaces, apologizing whenever her hips brushed a chair or someone complained she took up too much room. Roman did not struggle, hesitate, or make her feel heavy. He held her as if protecting her was the only task that mattered. "You don't have to carry me," she murmured. "You were shot because of me." "I was shot because your security chief wanted you dead," she corrected. Roman looked down at her, surprised by the strength in her voice. "And because you pushed me out of the way." Anyone would have done it. "No," Roman said as he carried her into the dimly lit library. "They wouldn't." Dr. Hayes arrived within minutes and confirmed the bullet had only grazed Grace's shoulder. While he cleaned the wound, Roman stood near the window, his white shirt stained with her blood. Outside, rain streaked across the glass, and black SUVs blocked every exit from the estate. Inside, Grace watched him issue quiet commands. Every guest was searched. Every employee was questioned. The poison bottle was sealed as evidence. Roman cancelled the peace agreement scheduled for midnight, even after one of his advisors warned that 3 families might consider it an insult. "Let them," Roman replied. "Someone tried to kill a woman under my roof." Grace noticed he had not said someone tried to kill him. When the doctor finished bandaging her shoulder, Roman dismissed everyone except Grace and an older housekeeper named Mrs. Alvarez. "Tell me everything," he said. Grace explained that she had seen Marco replace the seal on the bottle near the pantry. She had followed him because his hands were shaking, and powerful men rarely looked afraid without reason. Behind the wine cellar door, she overheard him telling someone on the phone that Roman would be dead before the final auction item. "Why didn't you alert another guard?" Roman asked. Grace gave him a tired look. "Marco was the man in charge of the guards. I didn't know who else belonged to him." The answer impressed him, though his face revealed little. "You could have left." "And let you drink it?" "You don't know me." Grace glanced at the scar near his left hand, then at the dark room filled with photographs turned face down on the shelves. "I know people fear you. That doesn't mean you deserve to die." For a moment, Roman said nothing. No one spoke to him with such simple honesty. Most offered loyalty because they wanted money, protection, or status. Grace had risked her life for a man she did not even like. Mrs. Alvarez returned holding Grace's damaged purse. "We found this beneath the service cart." Inside was an envelope Grace had never seen before. Roman opened it and found $5,000 in cash, a train ticket leaving Chicago at dawn, and a handwritten note thanking Grace for poisoning his drink. Grace's face drained of color. "That isn't mine." Roman studied her, but instead of anger, she saw calculation. "I believe you." She blinked. "Why?" "Because a guilty woman would have taken the ticket before saving my life twice." He handed the envelope to a guard and ordered every camera recording recovered. Then he turned back to Grace. "Until Marco is found, you stay here under my protection." She shook her head. "My mother needs me." Roman already knew about the nursing home. During the doctor's examination, he had quietly ordered his men to investigate her background. "Your mother will have private security by morning, and her medical bills will be covered. Grace stiffened. I don't want charity. Roman stepped closer, but stopped before entering the space she clearly guarded. It isn't charity. It is a debt. Then let me decide how you repay it. Something almost warm entered his eyes. Agreed. Mrs. Alvarez brought Grace a clean sweater, but when Grace tried to stand, pain forced her back into the chair. Roman crouched in front of her and carefully helped guide her injured arm through the sleeve. His hands, feared throughout Chicago, moved with unexpected patience. Grace noticed the exhaustion beneath his controlled expression. When did you last sleep? She asked. Roman froze. No one asked him questions like that. That is not your concern. Neither was your poisoned drink, she replied. Before he could answer, the library doors burst open. A guard carried in a laptop containing recovered security footage. The video showed Marco placing the envelope inside Grace's purse. But he was not alone. Beside him stood Vanessa Cross, the woman Roman was expected to marry before the peace agreement could be signed. Then the footage captured something even worse. Vanessa looked directly into the camera and smiled, as if she wanted Roman to know exactly who had betrayed him. Roman watched the footage twice without blinking. Vanessa Cross stood beside Marco Bell in the service corridor, elegant in her silver gown, while the security chief slipped the money and train ticket into Grace's purse. Then Vanessa faced the hidden camera and smiled. She knew we would find this, Grace said quietly. Roman closed the laptop. She wanted me to. Before he could issue an order, the ballroom doors opened and Vanessa entered with 2 attorneys and Councilman Victor Cross, her father, one of the 3 men whose political influence kept the DeLuca empire protected from federal investigation. Vanessa no longer looked frightened. She looked prepared. Roman, she said, glancing at Grace's borrowed sweater with open contempt, you should ask who edited that recording before you accuse your future wife. Grace lowered her injured arm, but Roman stepped between them. Use her name, he said. Vanessa's smile tightened. The maid? Grace Bennett. The room went still. Roman rarely corrected anyone for disrespect, especially not a woman he was expected to marry before midnight. Victor placed a leather folder on the desk. Inside were bank statements showing 3 payments to an account under Grace's name, each transferred from a company controlled by one of Roman's rivals. Grace stared at the pages. I've never seen that account. Of course not, Vanessa replied. You were paid to poison Roman, then created a scene to make yourself look like his savior. Marco discovered the plan, so you accused him before he could expose you. The lie was polished enough to sound reasonable. Roman's advisors began exchanging uneasy looks. If he defended Grace without proof, the alliance with the Cross family would collapse, and every enemy in Chicago would know his political protection was gone. Victor opened another folder. Sign the marriage agreement tonight, hand Miss Bennett to the police, and we treat this as an unfortunate misunderstanding. Refuse, and the peace agreement dies with it. Grace saw Roman's jaw harden. She also saw the weight behind his silence. Hundreds of employees, businesses, and families depended on the stability of his organization. Choosing her could start a war. I'll go, she said. Roman turned toward her. No. If the police investigate, they'll see the account isn't mine. The police Victor controls? Roman asked. His voice remained calm, but anger darkened his eyes. Grace looked at the armed men outside the library and understood the truth. She would never reach a police station. Then let me leave Chicago, she whispered. That is exactly what they want. Vanessa laughed softly. She has known you for 6 weeks, Roman. You have known me for 10 years. I've known your ambition for 10 years, he replied. I've known her courage for 1 hour. Vanessa's face changed. The insult struck deeper than shouting could have. Roman picked up the marriage agreement, tore it in half, and let the pieces fall across Victor's polished shoes. The deal is over. Victor's expression hardened. You are risking your empire for a servant. Roman moved closer to Grace, positioning his body between her and every threat in the room. I'm risking it because someone under my protection was framed, shot, and threatened in my home. Then he looked directly at Vanessa. And because you made the mistake of thinking I would sacrifice an innocent woman to preserve your family's power. Victor warned that by sunrise, Roman's ports, contracts, and judges would belong to his enemies. Roman answered with one quiet sentence. Then sunrise will be expensive. He ordered Vanessa and her father escorted from the estate, but Grace noticed Vanessa was not surprised. As she reached the doorway, Vanessa looked back at Grace. "You should call the nursing home before Roman's protection gets someone else hurt." Grace's breath caught. She rushed toward the desk phone, but Roman was already dialing his security team. No one answered at the nursing home. The private guards he had sent there had vanished. Then Grace's cell phone rang from inside her damaged purse. An unknown number appeared on the screen. Roman activated the speaker. Marco's voice filled the library. "Miss Bennett, your mother is safe for now, but she won't stay that way unless you bring Roman DeLuca to the abandoned cross warehouse on the river before 2 in the morning." Grace stared at the clock. They had less than 90 minutes. "Let me speak to her," she demanded. A weak, frightened voice came through the phone. "Grace?" Her mother began to cry before the line went silent. Roman took the phone, but Marco continued. "Come alone, Roman. No guards, no weapons, and bring the woman everyone thinks is innocent." The call ended. Grace's knees nearly gave way. Roman caught her carefully, avoiding her wounded shoulder, and lowered his voice. "I will bring her home." "You can't go," Grace said. "This is a trap for you." "I know. Then why are you acting like you've already decided?" Roman wrapped his coat around her shoulders and met her eyes. "Because they took your mother to control you, and they threatened you to control me. They will learn tonight that neither of us belongs to them." Grace wanted to believe him, but a guard suddenly entered, holding a small transmitter found beneath the lining of her purse. A red light blinked across its surface. Marco had been listening to every word. Then the estate's power failed, the windows went black, and somewhere in the darkness, a woman screamed Grace's name. The scream came from the east hallway, followed by the crash of breaking glass. Roman pulled Grace behind him as emergency lights flickered red along the walls. "Stay close," he ordered, but Grace caught his sleeve. That voice belonged to Mrs. Alvarez. Roman signaled 2 guards forward, then moved through the darkness with Grace only a step behind him. They found the older housekeeper beside the shattered display cabinet, shaken but unharmed, pointing toward the open service elevator. "A woman in a black coat took the security files," she said. She knew the access code. Roman's eyes narrowed. Only 4 people knew that code. One was Marco, another was Vanessa. The third was Roman himself. The fourth had been his younger brother Daniel, who had died 2 years earlier. Before Roman could question her, every television in the estate switched on at once. Vanessa's face appeared across the screens. Behind her sat Grace's mother, Eleanor Bennett, tied to a chair inside the abandoned warehouse. "You have 45 minutes, Vanessa said. "Bring Roman to the river, Grace, or your mother pays for your mistake." The screen went black. Grace's breath broke, but she did not collapse. She reached for the wall to steady herself, and Roman placed his hand over hers. "Look at me," he said. His voice softened in a way none of his men had ever heard. "She is alive. We are bringing her home." Grace looked at the clock. "You cancelled the alliance for me. Now they're using my mother to destroy you. They were already trying to destroy me. Then let me go alone." Roman stepped closer until the red emergency light caught the exhaustion in his eyes. "You saved my life when everyone else protected their own position. I will not reward that courage by abandoning you." Mrs. Alvarez suddenly whispered Grace's name. She opened the damaged cabinet and removed an old photograph hidden behind a row of ledgers. Grace froze when she saw it. The picture showed her late father, Thomas Bennett, standing beside Roman's father and a teenage Daniel DeLuca. Roman took the photograph, his expression changing. "Your father worked for my family?" "He was an accountant," Grace said. "He died when I was 16. My mother told me never to mention the DeLuca name." Mrs. Alvarez shook her head. Thomas was more than an accountant. He discovered someone stealing from the DeLuca companies. Before he could expose them, he was framed and killed in a staged robbery. Roman turned the photograph over. Written on the back was a date and 3 words, "Daniel knows everything." The room became colder. Daniel had died after warning Roman that someone inside the family was selling information to their enemies. Roman had believed a rival ordered the murder. Now he understood why Marco had chosen Grace, why Vanessa had watched her, and why Eleanor Bennett had been taken. "They think your mother has your father's evidence," Roman said. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She can barely remember what she ate yesterday. Memory loss may be what kept her alive. A guard restored partial power, and the security system revealed that the woman in the black coat had escaped through the underground garage. But she had left behind one item, a small cassette recorder taken from the cabinet. Grace stared at it. "My father used one exactly like that." Roman pressed play. Static filled the room. Then Thomas Bennett's voice emerged, weak but clear. He named Victor Cross as the man financing the theft and identified Marco Bell as the courier who passed DeLuca routes to rival families. Then another voice spoke in the background. Daniel's voice. Roman stopped breathing. His dead brother confirmed everything and added one final warning. If anything happened to them, the proof was hidden where Eleanor would always keep Grace safe. Grace remembered the music box her mother had carried from apartment to apartment, the one now sitting in her room at the nursing home. The kidnapping was never only about Roman. Vanessa needed Grace to lead her to the final evidence. Roman immediately ordered a team to search the nursing home, but Grace grabbed the recorder. "No, they're expecting your men. We give them what they think they want." Roman stared at her bandaged shoulder. "You are not walking into that warehouse. My mother is there because of my father's courage and my silence. I won't hide while you risk everything." He saw fear in her face, but beneath it was the same strength that had made her stop his poisoned drink. Roman removed the gun from inside his jacket and placed it on the table. "Then we faced them together." Minutes later, they drove toward the river in an unmarked sedan, without the convoy Vanessa expected. Rain swept across the windshield. Grace held the cassette recorder while Roman kept one hand near hers, never touching without permission. "What if this ends badly?" she whispered. Roman looked at her, and for the first time his answer held no command, only truth. "Then my last honest choice will still be choosing you." When they reached the warehouse, every light inside suddenly blazed on. Eleanor sat beneath a hanging lamp, Marco stood behind her, and Vanessa waited beside a table holding Grace's mother's music box. Then Victor Cross stepped from the shadows and pointed a weapon at Roman. "You brought the wrong evidence," he said. Grace looked at the music box, then at her mother's terrified face, and realized the final proof had already been removed. "The proof was never inside the music box," Grace said, and every face in the warehouse turned toward her. Victor Cross kept his weapon aimed at Roman, but his confident smile weakened. Rain hammered the metal roof while the river wind pushed through broken windows, making the hanging lamp a balloon sway. Grace looked at her mother, then at the empty velvet compartment inside the music box. She remembered how Eleanor had guarded it for years, yet always allowed Grace to hold it when thunder frightened her as a child. The box had not protected the evidence. It had protected a clue. "Your father was smarter than you," Victor said. "He died believing honesty could save him." Roman moved half a step in front of Grace. Marco immediately pressed his weapon against Eleanor's chair. "Move again, boss, and she pays for it." Roman stopped, his body rigid with controlled fury. "Let her mother go. You want me, not them." Vanessa laughed from beside the table. "You still don't understand. Grace is the last loose end. Her father found the records, Daniel confirmed them, and Eleanor hid them. Once all three Bennetts are gone, there is no witness left to connect us to Daniel's death." Grace's knees nearly buckled, but Roman's hand found hers behind his back. He did not pull or command. He simply held on, giving her the choice to remain beside him. Victor checked his watch. "In 12 minutes, 3 rival crews will arrive expecting Roman's body. When they find it, they will blame one another, and Chicago will tear itself apart while I collect what remains." Roman's gaze shifted toward the warehouse doors. "You sold my roots, arranged my brother's murder, and poisoned me to start a war." "Not a war," Victor replied. "A transfer of power." Grace studied the music box again. The faded melody printed inside the lid showed 7 notes, but one had been circled in blue ink. Her mother used to hum that song while sewing Grace's winter coats. Suddenly, Grace remembered the thick blue thread Eleanor had used to repair the lining of her coat after Thomas died. "Mom," she said carefully, "where is my blue coat?" Eleanor's frightened eyes moved toward Vanessa's black coat hanging over a nearby chair. Vanessa followed her gaze too late. Grace rushed forward, but Marco stepped into her path. Roman struck his arm aside, and the weapon slid across the concrete floor. Chaos erupted. Victor fired into the ceiling as Roman drove him behind a steel support beam. Vanessa grabbed the black coat and ran toward the loading platform, but Grace followed despite the pain tearing through her wounded shoulder. "Grace, stop!" Roman shouted. She refused. Vanessa reached the river door and tore at the coat's lining. A small waterproof envelope fell onto the floor. Both women lunged for it. Vanessa seized Grace's injured arm, expecting her to collapse, but Grace held her ground. "You spent your whole life thinking women like me were weak," Grace said through clenched teeth. "That was your mistake." She pulled free, caught the envelope, and stepped backward just as Vanessa lost her balance near the open platform. Grace could have let her fall into the freezing river. Instead, she grabbed Vanessa's wrist. For one stunned second, the woman who had mocked and framed her hung above the dark water, saved by the very person she had tried to destroy. Roman reached them and pulled Vanessa onto the platform before securing her hands. He looked at Grace's bleeding bandage, then at the envelope she held against her chest. "You should have let me handle it," he said, his voice trembling with fear rather than anger. "And let you have all the dramatic moments?" she replied. His expression softened for only a heartbeat. Across the warehouse, Eleanor kicked Marco's fallen weapon beneath a storage rack, while Roman's guards burst through a side entrance. Roman had not truly come alone. Before leaving the estate, he had hidden a tracker inside the cassette recorder and ordered his men to wait until Grace's mother was clear of the line of fire. Marco surrendered, but Victor grabbed Eleanor and pulled a concealed detonator from his pocket. Red numbers appeared on a device attached to the warehouse fuel line. 5 minutes remained. "Drop the envelope," Victor demanded, "or everyone dies." Grace looked at Roman. The documents could expose Victor, clear her father's name, and reveal the truth about Daniel. But her mother's life mattered more. She placed the envelope on the floor. Victor smiled and released Eleanor, then reached for the evidence. Roman could have attacked him, but Grace saw the wire leading from the detonator to a receiver near the table. She picked up the empty music box and threw it against the receiver. Sparks flashed, and the countdown froze at 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Victor turned toward her in disbelief. That moment was enough. Roman disarmed him and forced him to his knees while his guards carried Eleanor outside. Sirens approached in the distance. Summoned by copies of the cassette recording Roman had already sent to federal investigators and every major news desk in Chicago. Victor stared up at him. "You would destroy your empire for a maid." Roman looked across the warehouse at Grace, standing beneath the cold light with blood on her sleeve and courage in her eyes. "No," he said, "I'm rebuilding it for the woman who saved it." Then the frozen countdown suddenly started moving again, and Grace realized Vanessa was no longer beside the river door. The countdown dropped from 3 minutes to 2:59 as Roman spun toward the river door. Vanessa stood beside the fuel controls with a small remote in her hand, her silver gown torn and soaked by the rain. "Nobody leaves with my father's secrets," she shouted. Roman raised his weapon, but Grace stepped in front of him. "Don't shoot. If she falls on that switch, the warehouse goes with her." Vanessa smiled wildly. At least the maid understands. Smoke began curling from the damaged receiver while Roman's guards dragged Victor and Marco toward the exit. Eleanor was already outside, but Grace refused to move. She studied the pipes overhead, the emergency valves along the wall, and the faded safety instructions beside the loading platform. Her father had taught her to read every room before fear made decisions for her. "Roman," she whispered, "the red wheel behind Vanessa controls the main fuel line. It is too far away. Not from the river platform." Roman understood before she finished. He ordered everyone out, then took Grace's hand and ran with her toward the loading dock. Vanessa pressed the remote. The timer fell to 90 seconds. Roman climbed onto the narrow platform above the black water and reached for the valve, but a bullet from Victor's hidden backup weapon struck the railing beside him. The guards forced Victor down, yet the impact made Roman lose his footing. Grace caught his wrist with both hands. Pain ripped through her wounded shoulder, but she refused to release him. For years, people had treated her body as something inconvenient, something that took up too much space. Now her strength was the only thing keeping the most feared man in Chicago from falling into the freezing river. "Let go," Roman said. "You'll tear your stitches." Not a chance. With one desperate pull, she brought him back onto the platform. Roman looked at her as if the entire violent world had disappeared, leaving only the woman who had chosen him again. 30 seconds remained. He reached the valve and turned it, but it would not move. Grace wrapped her hands over his, and together they forced the rusted wheels shut. The fuel stopped flowing with 12 seconds left, yet the countdown continued. Vanessa laughed. "You only delayed it." Grace looked at the sprinkler pipe above her. She grabbed the metal hook from the dock wall and struck the emergency release. Water exploded across the warehouse, flooding the damaged receiver. The timer flashed 6, then 5, then died. Silence followed, broken only by rain and Vanessa's sobbing. Roman crossed the platform, took the remote from her hand, and turned her over to his guards. He did not threaten her. He simply said, "You mistook cruelty for power." By sunrise, Vanessa, Victor, and Marco were in federal custody. The recordings, financial records, and documents hidden inside Eleanor's blue coat exposed years of corruption, cleared Thomas Bennett's name, and proved that Daniel DeLuca had died trying to protect his brother. Roman dissolved the alliances built on Victor's influence and removed every disloyal man from his organization. He also placed his legitimate businesses under independent management, choosing stability over fear. Grace spent 2 days in a private hospital room while her shoulder healed. She expected Roman to send flowers and return to his empire. Instead, he appeared every morning with coffee prepared exactly the way she liked it, 2 sugars and too much cream. He never entered without knocking. He never touched her without asking. On the 3rd morning, Grace found him standing beside the window with her father's cleared record in his hands. "Your family deserved justice years ago," he said. "I cannot return what was taken." "No," Grace answered, "but you can decide what happens next." Roman turned toward her. The coldness in his face had not vanished, but it no longer controlled him. "Then decide with me." Weeks later, the DeLuca estate reopened for a charity dinner benefiting caregivers and nursing homes across Chicago. Grace entered the same ballroom where guests had laughed at her, wearing a deep blue dress that honored her curves instead of hiding them. Whispers followed her, but this time she did not shrink. Roman crossed the room in front of everyone and offered his hand. "Grace Bennett," he said clearly, "the woman who saved my life, my family's name, and the part of me I thought was already dead." He did not call her his maid. He did not present her as someone he had rescued. He introduced her as his equal and asked whether she would help lead the new foundation created in her father's name. Grace accepted the position, but when Roman asked for her heart, she made him wait long enough to prove that gentleness was not a temporary debt. He proved it every day. Months later, beneath warm lights in the estate garden, Roman knelt before her, while Eleanor watched from the front row. "You never needed to become smaller to be loved," he told Grace. "I only needed to become worthy of standing beside you." She said yes, and for the first time in years, the Mafia boss everyone feared smiled without hiding it. The angry man found peace. The woman everyone underestimated found her voice, and together they built a home where neither fear nor shame was welcome. Would you have risked everything the way Grace did for a man the whole city feared? Share your answer in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about courage, healing, and unexpected love.